you do with these.
All right. Now, I don't care about your serious face. You the only person that come up here and associate with me with S from the rip. Never done no business with S. You put that on this podcast, and your cronies run with it. I don't care about your attitude. Now, you go.
That's a fact.
I'm the only one up here that's ever affiliated you with S. Is that what you...
Ish straight up tells Joe Budden to watch his tone. And listen to this. It sets the vibe immediately. But hold up. Emanny draws a hard line in the sand and makes it clear people need to stop joking about certain things. This episode that dropped last Friday on the Joe Budden podcast was honestly top-tier content. It kicks off with Joe Budden and the crew clowning Emanny for rocking a shirt that says Coochie. Now here's the twist, because that Coochie brand actually comes from S. Yeah, remember S? She was the short-lived, controversial former co-host alongside Melissa Ford. She eventually fell out with Melissa Ford, but she also launched a clothing line that everyone on the pod started wearing. And girl, another detail from S's very, very brief run on the show is the obvious chemistry she seemed to have with Ish. It really looked like the interest was mutual, like she was feeling him and he was feeling her right back. Ish later even admitted that the two of them text each other pretty often, and when I interviewed S myself, she confirmed it again, saying Ish is cool, they stay in touch, and the communication is still there.
And being there, like, they're all cool with me. My intention was to be genuine when I was there. Ish and I have talked about like merch because we both have brands, but we're not,
okay.
Like, how they create like narrative about I have like a crush on Ish. Like Ish is in a relationship.
I haven't heard that. You've heard that before?
Yes. I mean, there was the infamous moment.
Like somebody said, what kind of guys or something like, and I said, oh, because my ex-boyfriend looks just.
S has definitely left a long shadow over everything. And listen to this, it's low-key fascinating that S seems to have a smoother relationship with the Joe Budden podcast and the co-hosts than Melissa Ford ever did. How ironic is that? But anyway, in this episode, Ish goes off like, yo, you're the goofy one who started this whole fake narrative about me and S doing whatever. He's like, that story is straight cap. All of y'all wear S's clothes and still do the most behind it. And honestly, he wasn't lying. S had Flip, and I think even Joe rocking some of her merch at one point. Her line is basically a clever spin on other brands like Coochie, Gucci, North Face, North, you name it. It's all playful branding with a wink and a smirk. So watching Ish snap and tell Joe to tighten up his attitude was actually pretty interesting. And hold up, because there was another moment involving S that caught my attention. S posted a picture on the balcony with Emanny, and the caption said LLMFL. Now come on, you already know what that means. Love of my life. Whoa, this whole situation is escalating fast, faster, and even faster. And I'm starting to think S is angling her way back on to the Joe Budden podcast. In her mind, I really believe she can't stand Melissa Ford, like hates her guts for real. I haven't had a direct conversation with S about any of this. Most of our interactions happen on Spaces. But I do think she wants back on that show. She wants that victory lap over Melissa Ford, like I'm on the Joe Budden podcast. Even if it's just as a guest, you're not. You got kicked out, big dog. And who really knows what S knows? I'm assuming she knows exactly why Melissa Ford actually left. All the tea, all the behind-the-scenes details. It's wild how every so-called op of Melissa Ford seems cooler with the cast than Melissa Ford herself. But speaking of Emanny, she also finally stepped in and set some real boundaries.
It's whack. It's really whack. And I know we don't do it with the intent of really trying to harm each other or say, but we got to stop joking about that shit because black boys go through it in that way and they don't feel confident to be able to talk to like.
Ever since he joined the show, he's basically been the designated punching bag. And listen, some of the jokes didn't just push the line, they sprinted past it. But the one that always crossed the line the hardest, in my opinion, came straight from Mark Lamont Hill. Yeah, that's right. All you intellectual community folks, your untouchable favorite, the dude y'all place on Mount Olympus, was saying some of the wildest, most foul stuff directly to Emanny.
Again.
Pass it to me and see what I do.
Show me where. Just show us where.
You know how violent he gets.
No, I'm not giving him the dog.
Pass it to me.
I'm not passing you shit. Just show us where he touched. But in general, like if it's just some regular, what happened to him?
Well, it's the side attraction.
You just did a whole conversation in Harlem talking to black boys about being abused.
He too.
That's why he invited you.
You guys invited you as a guest?
And those jokes were centered around sexual abuse. Now listen, I always felt like that crossed into terrible taste. That was bad, really bad. And here's the thing, he would never ever say something like that to a woman. So why is it okay to say it to a man? Imagine Mark saying to Melissa Ford, "Show me on the dial where they touched you," knowing something like that actually happened to Emanny. That's a serious issue to me, and the fact that cast members, even Mark, play with that topic shows a real lack of understanding of the weight of the situation. What ended up happening was they were breaking down Kevin Gates being vulnerable in a similar context, and that moment finally pushed Emanny to set boundaries. Now, to be fair, Mark's defense would be that he uses humor as a coping mechanism for trauma. And I take that as him telling us this is a subject he's personally familiar with. I do remember him saying in the past that a woman did something to him. I don't fully remember the details, but it was mentioned in an earlier episode. Overall, though, I've always felt like this creates a culture where people don't feel safe telling their full stories. It makes me wonder if folks are holding back real details and repackaging their experiences to make them easier for the audience to digest. I've noticed the Joe Budden podcast constantly framing stories as, oh, it was an older woman, an older woman. They never touch the third rail, and I think that's them carefully shaping the narrative, so if things ever come out, they don't look crazy. Because hooking up with an older woman sounds fly. It's the socially acceptable version of saying, yeah, I was that guy. Now, I know some of y'all are probably thinking, why are you even bringing this up? I'm saying this because joking about the older woman dynamic can make people who were victimized in other ways feel even more uncomfortable speaking up. All right, y'all, tell me what you think. I personally thought Emanny opening up like that was interesting, but I still don't believe the Joe Budden podcast is the place to share something deeply serious that happened to you. I also don't think Joe is the person you confide in like that. And honestly, I don't think that audience is built for those conversations either. There's really no safe space for it there. If I'm being real, you gotta break that down on your own platform. You control the narrative, because fans will weaponize it. Most people will clown it. Even in this back and forth, Joe cracked a joke and everyone laughed. I was sitting there like, yeah. It felt like Emanny got caught up in the moment and felt a sense of kinship with Kevin Gates being vulnerable, so he felt empowered to speak. But the ethos of the Joe Budden podcast is still roast culture. It's built on disrespect, pointing, laughing, clowning. That's why Ish is so careful about not positioning himself as a victim. He wants to frame his story as I was fly. I respected that. Yeah, he mentioned they were both young, but still, all the stories the guys tell are filtered through a masculine lens. Point blank, even when they tell stories about their fights, they always frame it like they never took an L. How is that even possible? Listen, most people who've really been in fights have lost at least once. But with these dudes, it's always, nah, every fight I was in, I handled business. Or, oh yeah, I was abused, but it was by this fine older chick a couple of years ahead of me. So what you're seeing on the JBP isn't real vulnerability. It just fits the tough masculine code baked into hip-hop culture. All right, y'all, let me know what you think. This episode was actually really solid. And hold up, I thought the previous Joe Budden podcast episode was really good too. After a rough 2 to 3 month stretch, it finally feels like the show bounced back like Ben Wallace swatting shots in the early 2000s. And I honestly think they're setting themselves up for a strong run because the Grammys just passed, the Super Bowl is right around the corner, everything is heating up, the Epstein files are slowly being rolled out, academics is firing at everybody in sight. Joe Budden and Charlemagne are carefully managing relationships, making sure they don't come off too biased, and that balancing act is creating some interesting content. And then there's the last domino waiting to fall, Drake releasing Iceman. Yes, I know, Kendrick fans and Drake haters are already saying, don't nobody care about no Iceman, but when Drake drops, oh boy, the entire podcast world goes into overdrive. You can look at the Joe Budden podcast history and see that many of its biggest peaks and valleys came from Drake releases. The view spikes, that rant, when Drake dissed Joe on Instagram, the battle, and boy oh boy, when that album finally drops because people are already anticipating it, you already know what's coming. There will be Drake disses. Drake will be dissing people back. Everyone will be breaking down lyrics frame by frame. That project alone is a stimulus package. Whether you're a Drake hater, a Drake fan, a Kendrick fan, a J. Cole fan, or a Joe Budden fan, or a Nicki Minaj fan, everybody will be locked into podcasts. Shoot, Joe might even throw that episode behind a paywall. Actually, yeah, Joe is definitely putting that behind a paywall. That's been his move lately because he knows people want Joe Budden's take on Drake. They know it. And once that domino drops, oh man, the comments are gonna go crazy. People will be yelling, "Yeah, Joe, cook him. Iceman is trash." Or flipping it with, "Nah, Joe, you were hating. Iceman is fire." Man, everybody's about to get paid. Everybody's about to get paid. Everybody. And yes, I'm even talking about the Kendrick-focused content creators. They're waiting on this Drake album like rent is due. They already know the money has been slowing up, and once they analyze Drake, break the album down, and call it trash, that bag opens back up. It's going to bring in a lot of money, way more money than what the last 4 months on YouTube have been looking like. That's just how it goes, and that's all I've got to say.